Hi, my name is Madison Parker. I'm 24 years old, and I just graduated with a degree in marketing from UCLA. That evening, I slipped into an elegant black dress and walked into an upscale restaurant in Beverly Hills, where golden chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in crisp white linens. Crystal glasses sparkled perfectly under the ambient glow, and champagne bubbled in flutes waiting to be raised in celebration. This was supposed to be my night. A celebration of a milestone earned through 4 years of grinding through coursework, balancing part-time jobs, and pushing through anxiety attacks during finals week. But when my family arrived 30 minutes late, I immediately knew my expectations had been completely misplaced. They walked in without smiles, without congratulations, and instead of acknowledging the degree I had just earned with honors, they immediately started complaining about the restaurant choice and began talking about my younger brother Jake's latest football achievements. The only pride they seemed capable of showing was reserved for their golden child. A few of my sorority sisters, polite and supportive, leaned over to my parents and said, "You must be so proud that Madison graduated summa cum laude from UCLA. That's incredible." But my parents responded with awkward smiles and dismissive comments that made the air around our table feel frozen. I sat there maintaining my smile while inside. Something was slowly breaking apart. Then came the moment I will never forget. My father, his face turning red with irritation, slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Stop trying to steal Jake's spotlight. This isn't about you." My mother whispered just loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "You're just jealous because Jake actually has a real future ahead of him." I lifted my head, gave them the coldest smile I could manage, and said the words that changed everything. Then maybe Jake should have paid for this dinner. In an instant, every conversation stopped. My friends stared wide-eyed. Professors looked stunned, while my father roared, "Get out! You're embarrassing this family," throwing me out of my own graduation celebration. That night, I understood that I had just been completely disowned, but in that very moment, I also chose to disown them in a way they could never have anticipated. Have you ever been humiliated by your own family on the most important day of your life, only to realize that blood doesn't always mean love? If you have, tell me where you're watching this from, so I know I'm not alone. Before that graduation dinner turned into a nightmare, my life had already been years of being treated like the family disappointment. For the past 4 years at UCLA, I wasn't just a student. I was working 25 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, not because I wanted extra spending money, but because I was the only one in my family actually paying for my own education. My parents had this twisted belief that since I was just getting a marketing degree and not something serious like pre-med or engineering, I should figure out my own way to pay for college. I remember my first day working at that coffee shop on campus. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but to me it represented independence. Every paycheck got divided immediately. Half went to tuition payments, a quarter to rent for my tiny shared apartment, and the rest had to cover textbooks, food, and basic survival. Meanwhile, my younger brother Jake was living like a king at USC on a partial football scholarship, with my parents covering every expense the scholarship didn't handle. They paid for his meal plans, his apartment, his car, even his spring break trips to Cabo. The contrast was stark and painful. While I was eating ramen noodles for the 3rd night in a row because I couldn't afford groceries, Jake was posting Instagram stories from expensive steakhouses with our parents. While I was wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation because I couldn't afford new clothes, they were taking him shopping for designer workout gear. While I was studying in the library until 2 a.m. because my apartment was too loud, they were paying for Jake to have a single dorm room with all the amenities. I still remember clearly when my laptop died during midterms junior year. I called my mom desperately, explaining that I needed it for my final projects that were worth 40% of my grade. She sighed and said, "Madison, we can't just throw money at every little problem you have. You're in college now. Figure it out." I ended up borrowing money from my roommate Emma, money I couldn't pay back for 3 months, just to buy a used laptop from a pawn shop. But 2 weeks later, Jake mentioned wanting a new gaming setup, and boom, there was a $3,000 computer delivered to his dorm. No questions asked. No lectures about figuring it out himself. The favoritism wasn't subtle. During family dinners, Conversations revolved entirely around Jake's football stats, his potential NFL prospects, how proud they were of their star athlete son. When I tried to share news about making Dean's List or landing a competitive internship at a major advertising agency, my dad would literally change the subject. "That's nice, honey. Jake, tell us about your game this weekend." It was like I was speaking a different language that they couldn't understand or didn't want to hear. I learned to stop sharing my achievements because the silence that followed was more painful than being ignored. When I made the Dean's List for the 3rd consecutive semester, I didn't even tell them. What was the point? When I got selected for a prestigious internship program that only accepted 10 students nationwide, I kept it to myself. When my marketing professor nominated me for a student leadership award, I went to the ceremony alone while they drove 6 hours to watch Jake play 3 minutes in a losing game. Some memories cut so deep that even thinking about them makes my chest tight. My 21st birthday fell on the same weekend as one of Jake's away games. My entire family drove 6 hours to watch him sit on the bench for most of the game, while I spent my milestone birthday alone in my apartment, eating leftover pizza and watching Netflix. I had hoped maybe they would at least call, but my phone stayed silent all day. Meanwhile, for Jake's 21st birthday 6 months later, they threw a massive party, rented out a whole restaurant, invited 50 people. I stood in the corner holding a Coke, watching everyone celebrate my brother, wondering if anyone even remembered that I existed. The pattern was crystal clear and had been for years. Jake was the investment. I was the afterthought. Every achievement I made was met with polite indifference, while his smallest accomplishments were treated like Olympic victories. When I got accepted into UCLA's competitive marketing program with a partial scholarship, my mom's response was, "Well, it's not a full ride like Jake would get." When I landed my first internship at a major advertising agency, my dad said, "Just don't let this distract you from your studies. We can't afford for you to fail and waste more money." The psychological impact of this constant comparison was devastating. I developed anxiety that kept me awake at night, wondering what was wrong with me that I couldn't earn their love. I threw myself into perfectionism, thinking if I could just achieve enough, excel enough, maybe they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally be proud. But every semester, every achievement, every honor was met with the same lukewarm response, while Jake's mediocre grades and average athletic performance were celebrated like championship victories. I remember one particularly painful Thanksgiving dinner during my senior year. Extended family was visiting, and my uncle asked what I was studying. Before I could answer, my mom jumped in. "Oh, Madison is doing some marketing thing, but Jake is the real star. Tell them about your stats this season." I sat there, invisible at my own family table, while Jake basked in the attention he hadn't even asked for. That night, I locked myself in my childhood bedroom and cried until I couldn't breathe, wondering why I wasn't enough, why nothing I did mattered. During those 4 years, I learned how to carry disappointment like a backpack full of stones. I told myself that graduation day would be different. I hoped that walking across that stage, earning my degree with honors, would finally force them to acknowledge what I had accomplished. I believed that ceremony would be undeniable proof that I deserved their pride too. I fantasized about them finally saying they were proud of me, finally posting about my achievements on social media, the way they constantly posted about Jake's football career. But deep down, I suspected the truth. If 4 years of academic excellence while they ignored me wasn't enough, if working myself to exhaustion while they lavished resources on Jake wasn't enough, maybe nothing would ever be enough. Maybe I would always be the disappointing daughter who chose the wrong major, who wasn't athletic enough, who wasn't worthy of their investment or attention. I lived with that quiet desperation for years, forcing smiles during family visits, pretending it didn't hurt when they forgot to ask about my grades or my internships or my future plans. I pretended it was normal that my achievements were footnotes in conversations about Jake's potential. I wasn't ready to face the reality that I might just be the family disappointment who happened to share their DNA, the daughter they tolerated rather than celebrated. And so all those memories, all those years of being overlooked and dismissed and treated like a second-class family member came crashing down like a tsunami that night at my graduation dinner. The dinner that was supposed to finally be about me, that turned into just another Jake appreciation event. that ended with me being thrown out of my own celebration for daring to speak the truth they didn't want to hear. The decision to have a graduation dinner wasn't about showing off or demanding attention, though I'm sure that's how my parents saw it. I simply wanted one evening where my accomplishment could be celebrated by the people who had actually supported me through college. My sorority sisters, my study group, the professors who believed in me. And yes, I still hoped against hope that my family would be there too. I wanted to believe that this time would be different. I spent weeks planning everything carefully, poring over details because I wanted it to be perfect. I chose Mastro's in Beverly Hills, not because it was the most expensive place I could find, but because it had this warm, sophisticated atmosphere with dim lighting and excellent service. I wanted somewhere that felt special, but not pretentious. Somewhere that would honor the achievement without making it about showing off. I didn't hire event planners or go overboard. I called the restaurant myself, spent hours on the phone working with their staff on a menu that would accommodate everyone, including my vegetarian sorority sister Emma and my professor Dr. Martinez, who had dietary restrictions. My guest list was small but meaningful. I invited my closest friends from the Delta Gamma sorority, the girls who had stayed up with me during all-night study sessions and held my hair back when stress made me physically sick during finals week. These were the women who had seen me at my lowest points, who had celebrated my small victories when my family ignored them, who had become the sisters I never had growing up. I invited my marketing professor, Dr. Martinez, who had become a mentor and helped me land that competitive internship, who had written recommendation letters and believed in my potential when my own parents dismissed my major as unimportant. A few classmates from my advanced advertising class made the list, along with my study group who had become like family over 4 years of shared struggles and successes. And of course, despite everything, I invited my parents and Jake. Despite every disappointment, every dismissive comment, every forgotten birthday and ignored achievement, I still wanted them there. I wanted to believe that this time would be different, that seeing me in that cap and gown, surrounded by people celebrating my achievements, would finally make them proud of me too. I was still that little girl inside, desperately hoping for their approval, still believing that if I just tried hard enough, they would finally see my worth. I remember crafting the message for our family group chat carefully, typing and deleting several versions before settling on, "Hey everyone, I'm planning a small graduation dinner next Saturday at 7 p.m. at Mastro's in Beverly Hills. Really hoping you can all make it. This day means everything to me, and I'd love to share it with my family." My heart pounded as I waited for responses. Jake responded first with a simple thumbs-up emoji, which I chose to interpret as enthusiasm. My mom's response came an hour later. "We'll try to make it if we're not too tired from Jake's tournament this weekend. Don't make it too late. You know how your father gets when his schedule is disrupted." Not exactly the enthusiastic, wouldn't miss it for the world I was hoping for, but I told myself it was better than nothing. The days leading up to dinner, I threw myself into preparation with an obsessive attention to detail. I picked up my cap and gown from the campus bookstore, had my hair done at a nice salon for the first time in months, bought that black dress that made me feel confident and sophisticated, rather than like the struggling college student I'd been for 4 years. I wrote personalized thank you notes for each guest, expressing how much their support had meant to me throughout college, how they had been my real family during the hardest years of my life. As I prepared, part of me kept fantasizing about the moment my parents would walk into that restaurant, see all my friends and professors there celebrating me, hear the speeches about my achievements, and finally realize what I had accomplished. I pictured them looking around that room with pride, maybe even posting about it on social media for the first time in 4 years. I imagined my dad finally saying he was proud of me, my mom finally bragging about my accomplishments the way she constantly bragged about Jake's. I was setting myself up for heartbreak, but I couldn't help clinging to that hope like a life preserver in rough waters. The night before dinner, I called my mom to confirm details and make sure they had the address. She answered with zero enthusiasm in her voice, like I was bothering her with something trivial. "Oh, right. That's tomorrow. We'll probably be there, unless Jake needs us for something more important." She paused, and I could hear the TV in the background. "You know, Madison, this seems like a lot of fuss for a bachelor's degree. Jake's going to have a much bigger celebration when he gets drafted to the NFL. The casual dismissal in her voice made my stomach clench. but I managed to keep my voice steady. "I understand, Mom. I just hope you can be there. It would mean a lot to me." When I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment feeling that familiar weight in my chest, but I pushed it down. This was my night, regardless of their attitude. The morning of my graduation ceremony, I woke up early and got ready alone in my apartment. No family breakfast, no proud parents taking photos, no excitement from anyone but me. I drove myself to campus, walked across that stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude, and looked out into the audience where other families were cheering and crying with pride. My parents weren't there. They had decided Jake's practice was more important than my graduation ceremony. I took a selfie with my diploma and posted it on social media with the caption, "We did it." But the "we" felt hollow, because I had done it entirely alone. The night of dinner, Mastro's glowed with warm, amber lighting. Candles flickered on every table, casting dancing shadows on the dark wood paneling. Soft jazz played in the background, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and celebratory. I arrived early in my black dress, the one that made me feel like I could conquer the world, and surveyed the private dining area I had reserved. The flowers I had ordered, white roses mixed with eucalyptus, were arranged perfectly on each table. The menu cards with our customized dinner selections were placed at each setting. Everything looked exactly as I had envisioned. My friends arrived first, as they always did for me when it mattered. Emma and the Delta Gamma girls rushed over with a massive bouquet of white roses and squealing congratulations, immediately filling the space with the kind of excited energy I had been craving from my family for years. Dr. Martinez arrived next, dapper in his suit, and handed me a beautifully wrapped gift while saying, "Madison, you've been one of my most dedicated students. I'm so proud of who you've become." My study group presented me with a scrapbook they had secretly been working on for months, filled with photos from our late-night library sessions, inside jokes, and notes of encouragement from our 4 years together. For a moment, surrounded by all that love and support, I thought maybe this night would be perfect, even if my family didn't show up. But at 7:30, 30 minutes late as always, my family finally walked in. The contrast between their energy and my friends' enthusiasm was immediately obvious and painful. My parents entered looking like they were attending a funeral rather than a celebration. My dad wore a wrinkled polo shirt and khakis, clearly having made no effort to dress for the occasion. My mom had on a simple black dress, but with the kind of forced smile you give when you're doing someone a favor you don't want to do. Jake trailed behind them in a USC football jersey, like he couldn't be bothered to dress appropriately for his sister's graduation dinner, like he wanted everyone to know where his priorities lay. They carried no flowers, no gifts, no congratulations cards, no signs that this was supposed to be a celebration. The lack of effort was glaring when compared to my friends, who had all brought thoughtful gifts and were dressed beautifully for the occasion. I hurried over to greet them, plastering on my biggest smile and trying to salvage the mood. "I'm so glad you made it." My mom gave me a brief, stiff hug, while my dad nodded in my general direction without even making eye contact. Jake was already looking around the restaurant like he'd rather be anywhere else, checking his phone for what I assumed were messages from his teammates. As we took our seats, I tried desperately to salvage the mood and include my family in the celebration. I introduced them to my friends with genuine pride, hoping they would at least pretend to be proud of me in return. But within 5 minutes, my parents had completely hijacked every conversation to talk about Jake's football career. When Dr. Martinez tried to compliment my academic performance and discuss my thesis project on social media marketing strategies, my dad cut him off to explain Jake's latest recruitment offers from professional teams. When Emma mentioned how hard I had worked while managing a job and maintaining my GPA, my mom redirected to discuss Jake's rigorous training schedule and how impressed his coaches were with his dedication. I watched my friends' faces change from excitement to confusion to pity as they realized what was happening. This wasn't just absent-minded parenting or social awkwardness. This was deliberate dismissal. My parents weren't just failing to celebrate me. They were actively stealing my spotlight and giving it to my brother, who wasn't even graduating, who wasn't even the reason we were there. Jake, for his part, seemed uncomfortable, but didn't try to redirect attention back to me. He just sat there letting our parents use him as a weapon against my achievement, enjoying the praise while I watched my graduation dinner become another Jake appreciation event. The pattern continued throughout the meal. Every attempt by my friends or professor to acknowledge my accomplishments was met with redirections to Jake's athletic career. My parents regaled the table with stories of his high school football glory days, his college recruitment process, his potential professional prospects. They showed photos on their phones of him in his uniform, discussed his training regimen, mentioned his coach's praise with the kind of pride in their voices I had never heard when they talked about me. Meanwhile, when Dr. Martinez mentioned that I had been selected for a competitive post-graduation fellowship, my mom's response was, "That's nice, but Jake is looking at contracts with teams in California. Real career opportunities, you know?" When Emma shared that I had been chosen to lead our sorority's alumni networking initiative, my dad said, "Well, Jake's already networking with professional athletes and coaches. That's the kind of networking that actually matters for success." The breaking point came when Dr. Martinez, bless his heart, tried one more time to center the conversation on me. He stood up and addressed the table with the kind of respect and pride I had been desperately craving from my family. "I just want to say how proud we should all be of Madison. Graduating summa cum laude while working part-time is no small feat. She completed one of the most challenging thesis projects I've supervised, on the intersection of social media psychology and consumer behavior. She's going to do incredible things in marketing, and any company would be lucky to have her." The restaurant fell quiet for a moment, and I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe now they would finally acknowledge me, finally show some pride in what I had accomplished. My heart pounded as I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything, that showed they were proud of their daughter who had just graduated with highest honors from one of the best universities in the country. But my father's face darkened instead of lighting up with pride. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He didn't stand up to add his own words of celebration. Instead, he looked annoyed, like Dr. Martinez had just interrupted something important, like my achievements were an inconvenience rather than something worth celebrating. My mother whispered something to Jake that I caught part of, something about attention-seeking and always trying to compete. And that's when I felt something inside me finally snap. The years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated like I didn't matter came crashing over me like a wave. The birthdays they forgot while throwing elaborate parties for Jake. The achievements they ignored while celebrating his mediocre accomplishments. The money they refused to help me with while funding his every want and need. The constant message that I wasn't worth their time, attention, or pride. All of it condensed into this one moment where they couldn't even let me have one night, one dinner, one celebration that was supposed to be about me. I drew a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly but my voice steady and clear. "Excuse me, everyone." The chatter stopped immediately. All eyes turned to me. My friends looking concerned, my professor looking curious, my family looking annoyed that I was interrupting their Jake celebration. "I need to address something that's become very clear tonight." My voice grew stronger with each word, powered by years of suppressed frustration and hurt. For 4 years, I've worked my ass off to earn this degree. I've maintained a 3.9 GPA while working 25 hours a week to pay my own tuition, because my parents decided that my education wasn't worth investing in. I've built relationships with professors who believe in my potential, excelled in competitive internships, and graduated with the highest honors this university offers. The table had gone completely silent. I could hear the soft jazz playing in the background, the clink of glasses from other tables, but our section had become a vacuum of shocked attention. My father's face was turning that familiar shade of red, but I wasn't finished. Years of silence were finally breaking free. But sitting here tonight, listening to my parents turn my graduation dinner into another celebration of my brother's football career, I'm realizing something important. This isn't about them being proud of Jake. This is about them being ashamed of me, and I'm done pretending that's okay. Dr. Martinez was staring at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. My sorority sisters had their phones out. I realized later they were recording this whole confrontation. Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, finally understanding how his complicity had contributed to years of my pain. But my parents? My parents looked furious that I had dared to call them out publicly, that I had dared to center myself at my own graduation dinner. For 4 years, I've watched you pay for every expense Jake has while I've struggled to afford textbooks and groceries. I've watched you drive 6 hours to watch him sit on a bench for 3 minutes, while I spent my 21st birthday completely alone because you couldn't be bothered to call. I've watched you dismiss every achievement I've made while treating his average grades and mediocre athletic performance like some kind of miracle. My voice cracked slightly as years of hurt poured out, but I pushed through. And now, on my graduation night, at a dinner I planned and paid for to celebrate an achievement I earned entirely on my own, you can't even pretend to be proud of me for 30 seconds without making it about him. The restaurant had gone quiet. Even servers had stopped moving, sensing the tension at our table. Other diners were stealing glances, trying to figure out what was happening. In that moment of absolute silence, my father finally exploded with the rage that had been building on his face. He slammed his palm on the table so hard that wine glasses jumped and silverware rattled. "How dare you embarrass this family like this?" he bellowed loud enough that everyone in the restaurant turned to stare. "Jake has a real future ahead of him. You're just jealous because you know you'll never amount to anything. Marketing degrees are worthless. You've wasted 4 years on nothing while your brother is building something real." That's when my mother delivered what she thought would be the final blow, her voice dripping with condescension. "Stop trying to steal Jake's spotlight. This isn't about you, and it never should be. You're just jealous that Jake actually has talent worth celebrating." The cruelty in her voice, the casual dismissal of everything I had worked for, the complete lack of maternal love or pride. It crystallized everything I had suspected for years. I wasn't their daughter. I was an inconvenience, a disappointment, someone to be tolerated rather than loved. But instead of breaking me, their words finally set me free. In that moment of absolute clarity, I smiled. Not a sad smile, not a broken smile, but the coldest, most calculating smile I'd ever produced. It was the smile of someone who had finally stopped caring about earning love from people incapable of giving it. "You're absolutely right, Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This isn't about me. It never has been, has it? You've made that crystal clear for 4 years. So let me make something crystal clear to you." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the silent restaurant. "Since this apparently isn't my night, and I'm just embarrassing the family by existing, let me solve that problem for you." I pulled out my phone, and right there in front of everyone, opened Instagram. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady with purpose. I posted a photo from earlier that day of me in my cap and gown, holding my diploma. The caption I wrote was simple but devastating. "Graduated summa cum laude today. Special thanks to everyone who actually supported me through college. My sorority sisters, my professors, my study group, and everyone who believed in me when my own family couldn't. You know who you are. Here's to choosing your own family and building your own success. UCLA. Marketing grad. Self-made, and she chose my own family. Real family supports each other." The post went live immediately, and I could see my father's face drain of color as he realized what I had just done. I had publicly called them out without naming them directly, but anyone who knew our family would understand exactly what that caption meant. "There," I said, putting my phone away. "Now you don't have to pretend to be proud of the daughter who embarrasses you, and I don't have to pretend that this is a family worth wanting approval from." My father's voice cracked like thunder. Get out right now. You're embarrassing this family." The irony wasn't lost on me. He was screaming at me for embarrassing the family while causing a scene that had every person in the restaurant staring at us. But I didn't point that out. Instead, I gathered my purse with deliberate calm and looked around at my friends who were staring in shock and admiration. "Don't worry about the bill," I announced loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. "I'll handle it. Wouldn't want Jake to have to pay for anything he didn't earn." The dig was subtle but sharp, and I could see understanding dawn on several faces around the restaurant. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to freedom. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting. My mother trying to do damage control with other diners. Jake finally speaking up to defend me, but too little too late. My friends calling my name and gathering their things to follow me. But I didn't look back. I had finally stopped looking back. That night, I understood that I had been officially disowned. But more importantly, I realized that I had been the one holding on to a family that never really wanted me in the first place. As I pushed through those restaurant doors into the cool Beverly Hills night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. The weight of trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it had finally lifted from my shoulders. I stepped outside, and the valet looked at me with obvious concern. "Miss, are you all right? Do you need us to call someone?" I looked back through the restaurant windows and saw my family still sitting at that table, probably talking about how dramatic and attention-seeking I was, how I had ruined what should have been a simple dinner. My real family, Emma, Dr. Martinez, my study group, my sorority sisters, were gathering their things, clearly planning to follow me out and make sure I was okay. "No," I told the valet, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I think I'm exactly where I need to be." For the first time in my life, I had set a boundary that couldn't be crossed. I had called out the favoritism, the neglect, the casual cruelty that had defined my relationship with my parents for as long as I could remember. And you know what? The world didn't end. I didn't die from speaking my truth. If anything, I felt more alive than I had in years. I had finally stopped begging for scraps of love from people who saw me as competition for their golden child. That night, as I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by my real friends, Emma holding my hand while Dr. Martinez assured me that I had done nothing wrong, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the family disappointment. I was done accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from strangers. I was done making myself smaller so Jake could shine brighter in their eyes. From that moment on, I would build my own life, my own success, my own family, one that would be based on mutual respect and genuine love, not blood relation and obligation. Little did I know that this decision would lead to consequences I never could have imagined, and a kind of justice sweeter than I ever thought possible. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. The Instagram post from the night before had gained traction overnight, but that was nothing compared to what I discovered when I opened TikTok. Someone at the restaurant had filmed my confrontation with my parents and posted it with the caption, "Girl calls out her toxic family at her own graduation dinner." The video had over 100,000 views already and was climbing rapidly. The comments were a mix of support and criticism, but the majority were overwhelmingly on my side. "Get it, girl. Call them out." The way she stayed calm while they screamed says everything. This is what setting boundaries looks like. I felt this in my soul. Some families really do have a golden child. But there were also critics. So disrespectful to parents. Family drama doesn't belong on social media. She seems like an attention seeker. But the real chaos was just beginning in my family. The first text was from my mom at 6 a.m. "Madison, take down that post immediately. You're embarrassing the entire family. What will people think? Your cousin Sarah already called asking questions. This is unacceptable." Another message quickly followed. "Your father is furious. You've humiliated us in front of everyone we know. The neighbors are talking. How could you do this to us?" I scrolled through dozens of messages from relatives, family friends, even my high school teachers who had seen the viral video. Some were supportive. "Honey, I always wondered about how they treated you differently. Good for you for standing up for yourself." Others were scandalized. "I can't believe you spoke to your parents like that. They're devastated." But the one that made me smile was from my great-aunt Ruth, my dad's sister who had always been the black sheep of the family. "Honey, I've been waiting 20 years for someone to call your parents out on their bullshit. Proud of you. If you need anything, I'm here." By noon, my parents were in full damage control mode. They had posted their own statement on Facebook, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who had caused a scene because I was jealous of Jake's success and couldn't handle not being the center of attention. They conveniently left out the part about dismissing my education, refusing to support me financially, or turning my graduation dinner into another Jake appreciation event. Their post read, "We're heartbroken by our daughter Madison's behavior last night. We've always been proud of both our children's achievements, but we're disappointed that Madison chose to create drama and make false accusations at what should have been a family celebration. We love both our children equally and have always supported them both. Please keep our family in your thoughts during this difficult time." But here's the thing about the internet. Once people smell family drama, they dig deep. And the more people dug, the worse my parents looked. My sorority sisters had posted their own videos supporting me, showing photos of me working at the coffee shop during school, studying until 3 a.m. in the library, celebrating achievements alone while my parents posted about Jake's games. Emma posted a particularly damning video showing screenshots of my parents' social media over the past 4 years. Dozens of posts about Jake's football career, his achievements, his games, and exactly 0 posts about my academic accomplishments, my internships, or my graduation. Dr. Martinez, bless him, had shared an academic article about the psychological effects of parental favoritism on his LinkedIn, along with a post about how proud he was of his students who overcome family challenges to succeed. Even some of Jake's teammates started commenting about how they'd always thought my parents' treatment of me was messed up, sharing stories of family dinners where I was ignored while they talked endlessly about Jake. The narrative my parents were trying to control was slipping away from them rapidly. Instead of looking like the victims of an ungrateful daughter, they were starting to look like exactly what they were. Parents who had blatantly favored one child over another for years. People were sharing their own stories in the comments, talking about golden child syndrome, comparing my parents' behavior to their own toxic family dynamics. That's when Jake called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was quiet, subdued, completely different from his usual confident tone. "Madison," he began, and I could hear the weight in his voice. I never realized how bad it was. I mean, I knew they talked about me more, but I thought you didn't care about that stuff. You always seemed so independent, so focused on your own thing. I waited for him to continue, not making it easy for him. But watching that video, seeing how they treated you at your own graduation dinner, that was fucked up. Really fucked up. And reading all these comments from people who knew us, people saying they always noticed how differently Mom and Dad treated us. He paused. I'm starting to understand that maybe I was part of the problem. It was the first time in our lives that Jake had acknowledged the favoritism. The first time he had seemed to understand that his position as the golden child had come at my expense. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sad that it had taken a public meltdown and viral video for him to see what had been obvious for years. I've been getting messages from people all day, he continued, his voice heavy with guilt. From my teammates, from their parents, from family friends, from people at school. Everyone saying the same thing, that Mom and Dad were wrong, that they treated you like shit while putting me on this pedestal I never asked to be on. Some of my teammates are saying they always thought it was weird how differently they talked about us when they came to games. I could hear the genuine remorse in his voice, and despite everything, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Jake, I appreciate you saying that. But this isn't about you feeling bad now. This is about 24 years of being treated like I was less important than you. Like my achievements didn't matter. Like I was just taking up space in a family that already had its star. I know, he said quietly. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to make up for all the times I should have said something. All the times I let them dismiss you while they praised me for doing the bare minimum. You can't fix it, I told him, my voice steady but not unkind. That's the point. Some things can't be fixed with apologies after the damage is already done. By evening, the story had been picked up by a local news station. A reporter from Channel 7 reached out to me for comment, wanting to do a piece about family dynamics and social media. I declined the interview. I had said everything I needed to say in that restaurant. My parents, however, jumped at the chance to give their side of the story, clearly thinking they could control the narrative and paint themselves as victims of an ungrateful child. The interview was a disaster for them. The reporter, a woman named Jessica Chen, had clearly done her homework. She had seen the viral video, read the social media posts, and had crafted questions that exposed the holes in their victim narrative. So, you're saying you've always treated both your children equally? Jessica asked, her tone neutral but pointed. Absolutely, my mother replied, nodding emphatically. We love both our children. Madison is just going through a difficult phase, and she's chosen to handle it in a very public, very hurtful way. But viewers have pointed out that your social media shows dozens of posts celebrating Jake's football career over the past 4 years, and no posts about Madison's academic achievements. How do you respond to that? My father's face flushed red, and he stammered for a moment before saying, Well, Jake's achievements are more more visible. Football is exciting. Academic achievements are more private. Madison graduated summa cum laude from UCLA while working part-time to pay her own tuition. Jessica continued. That seems like something most parents would want to celebrate publicly. Did you help fund her education the way you helped fund Jake's? The pause that followed was damning. My mother's eyes darted to my father, and he cleared his throat uncomfortably. Every family handles finances differently. We wanted Madison to learn independence. But Jake received financial support for his college expenses. That's different. He's an athlete. He has different needs. The interview continued to deteriorate from there. When Jessica played audio from the viral video, my father yelling, "You'll never amount to anything," and my mother saying, "This isn't about you," their faces went pale. When she asked them to respond to the specific words they had used, they became defensive and flustered. Those words were taken out of context, my mother insisted. Madison was being dramatic and causing a scene. We were just trying to calm the situation by telling her she'll never amount to anything at her own graduation dinner. The interview aired that evening, and it was even worse for my parents than I had expected. The contrast between their defensive, contradictory answers and the clear evidence of their favoritism made them look terrible. The comments on the news station's social media were brutal. Those parents are disgusting. How can you treat your own child like that? That girl is better off without them. But the best part? The interview had been filmed at my parents' house, and viewers could see Jake's football trophies and photos covering the mantle in the background, while there wasn't a single photo or award of mine visible anywhere. The visual evidence of the favoritism was undeniable. That's when I decided it was time for phase 2 of my plan. Going viral had given me something I'd never had before, a platform, and I was going to use it to tell my story completely, on my own terms. I created a TikTok account that night and posted my first video. It was simple. Me sitting in my tiny apartment, speaking directly to the camera, calm and collected despite everything that had happened. A lot of people have been asking about what happened at my graduation dinner. Since my parents decided to give their side of the story to the news, I thought I'd share mine. Over the next 15 minutes, spread across 3 videos, I laid out the whole story methodically. The years of working to pay my own tuition, while they funded Jake's college experience completely. The forgotten birthdays and missed milestones. The constant comparisons and dismissive comments. I showed receipts, screenshots of tuition payments I'd made from my bank account, photos of me working at the coffee shop while my classmates partied, even old family photos where the favoritism was visually obvious. In one particularly damning photo from Jake's high school graduation party, my parents were beaming with pride, arms around him, while I stood awkwardly to the side, clearly an afterthought in my own family. In another photo from a family vacation, Jake was front and center while I was literally cropped half out of the frame. But I didn't present any of this with anger or tears. I spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had finally found their voice and their truth. I ended the video series with this. I'm not sharing this for sympathy or to hurt my family. I'm sharing it because I know there are other people out there who feel invisible in their own families, who've been told their achievements don't matter, who've been made to feel like they're competing for love that should be freely given. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You deserve better. And sometimes choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do. The videos exploded across social media. Within 48 hours, they had accumulated over 2 million views combined. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of family favoritism, of being the scapegoat child, of finally standing up for themselves. I was getting messages from around the world, people thanking me for giving them the courage to set their own boundaries, for showing them that they weren't obligated to accept poor treatment just because it came from family. The response was overwhelming and mostly positive, but it also attracted attention I hadn't expected. Major news outlets picked up the story. Podcasters reached out wanting interviews. Mental health professionals shared my videos as examples of healthy boundary setting. I was even contacted by a literary agent who thought my story could become a book about family dynamics and recovery from emotional abuse. Meanwhile, my parents' damage control efforts were failing spectacularly. The local news station did a follow-up story featuring interviews with my college friends and professors, all of whom painted a picture of a hard-working, kind person who had never spoken badly about her family despite years of neglect. Dr. Martinez gave a particularly powerful interview about my work ethic and character, contrasting it sharply with my parents' public claims about my being dramatic and attention-seeking. In 4 years of knowing Madison, I never once heard her complain about her family situation. He told the reporter, "She worked harder than any student I've taught, often staying after class to ask questions because she was balancing work and studies. The idea that she's some kind of attention-seeking drama queen is absurd. This is a young woman who has overcome significant obstacles with grace and determination." Emma and my other sorority sisters organized their own response, creating a video montage of my college years that told a very different story than the one my parents were trying to sell. They showed footage of me working at the coffee shop, studying in the library at midnight, celebrating small victories alone because my family wasn't interested. They included screenshots of group chats where I had talked about feeling invisible at home, where I had asked for advice about how to connect with parents who seemed uninterested in my life. The contrast between this evidence and my parents' interviews was stark and damning. They looked like exactly what they were: parents who had failed their daughter and were now trying to rewrite history to make themselves look better. Then something beautiful started happening. Opportunities began presenting themselves in ways I never could have imagined. A major advertising agency in Los Angeles reached out, having seen my story and been impressed by how I had handled the situation with such professionalism and dignity. They offered me an entry-level position with a starting salary that was significantly higher than what I had been hoping for. "We've been following your story," the hiring manager told me during our video call. "The way you've conducted yourself through this difficult situation shows exactly the kind of character and communication skills we look for in our employees. You turned a personal crisis into a platform for helping others, and you did it with class. That's the kind of thinking we need in our industry." A publishing company reached out about turning my experience into a book about family dynamics and setting healthy boundaries. A talent agency wanted to discuss representation for potential speaking engagements. Brands that aligned with my values, companies focused on education, women's empowerment, mental health awareness, started approaching me about partnerships. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other young adults who had experienced similar family dynamics. I was getting hundreds of messages daily from people sharing their own stories of favoritism, emotional neglect, and the struggle to maintain relationships with family members who didn't value them. Many were asking for advice about how to set boundaries, how to protect their mental health, how to build chosen families when their biological families had failed them. I started responding to as many messages as I could, and eventually began posting response videos with advice about navigating toxic family relationships. Without intending to, I had become a voice for people who felt unheard in their own families. It was something I never could have planned, but it felt meaningful in a way that made all the pain worth it. Meanwhile, my parents were dealing with escalating social fallout in their personal lives. Old family friends were distancing themselves, having seen the evidence of their favoritism and being uncomfortable with how they had treated me. My dad's business partners were asking uncomfortable questions, worried about being associated with someone who was being publicly called out for emotional abuse. My mom had to quit her book club because the other women kept bringing up my story, asking pointed questions about parenting that she couldn't answer. Even their church community was divided. While some older members supported them with the traditional "honor your parents" rhetoric, many younger families with children my age were openly critical. Several parents approached them after services to say they had shown their own children my videos as examples of the importance of treating all kids equally. Jake's football career was taking hits, too. College recruiters were asking questions about family character during interviews. Some of his teammates' parents had banned their kids from hanging out with him, not wanting their children associated with the family drama. The golden child was finally experiencing consequences for years of being complicit in my parents' favoritism, for enjoying the benefits of their unequal treatment without ever speaking up for his sister. 3 weeks after my graduation dinner, I was sitting in a sleek Beverly Hills office, signing contracts with my new advertising agency and discussing my starting date, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number. I almost didn't answer. I had been successfully ignoring their calls for weeks, but something made me pick up. "Madison." Her voice was different than I had ever heard it. Smaller, less certain, stripped of the condescending tone that had characterized our interactions for years. "We need to talk." "We tried talking," I said, my voice calm and professional. "It ended with Dad screaming at me to get out and you telling me I'd never amount to anything. I think we said everything we needed to say. Your father and we've been thinking about what you said, about everything that's happened." She paused, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Maybe we could meet somewhere quiet, just to talk, to try to work things out." I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the bustling Sunset Boulevard below, at all the people living their lives without the weight of family dysfunction on their shoulders. "Mom, I'm kind of busy building a life where I'm actually valued and respected. Please, Madison. We miss you. The house feels empty without you. Nothing feels right." For just a moment, I felt that old familiar tug, the part of me that had spent years hoping for their approval, for their love, for them to finally see me as worthy of their attention. The part of me that wanted to believe they could change, that this crisis might have finally opened their eyes to how they had treated me. But then I remembered that night at the restaurant. I remembered years of being invisible, of working myself to exhaustion while they lavished attention and resources on Jake, of begging for scraps of recognition that never came. I remembered the casual cruelty in my mother's voice when she said, "This isn't about you," at my own graduation dinner. "I'm sorry, Mom, but missing someone and loving them aren't the same thing. If you loved me, you would have shown it when it mattered. You would have been proud of my achievements instead of dismissing them. You would have supported my education instead of making me work to afford it while you paid for everything Jake wanted." "But Madison, we're family." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm but not angry. "Family isn't about sharing DNA. It's about showing up for each other. It's about celebrating each other's successes instead of tearing them down. It's about love being unconditional, not dependent on staying quiet while one child is favored over another." There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear her breathing. "I've found my real family," I continued. "People who see me, who value me, who celebrate my achievements instead of dismissing them. People who would never humiliate me on one of the most important nights of my life, just to make their golden child feel special. Madison, please, we can change. We want to make this right. I hope you do change, for Jake's sake, and for your own. But it's too late for us. Some things can't be undone with apologies. Some damage is permanent. But we're your parents. Being a parent is about more than biology. It's about actually caring for your child, supporting them, making them feel valued and loved. You had 24 years to be parents to me. Instead, you chose to make me feel like I was competing for love in my own family. That's not something I'm going to subject myself to anymore. I have to go, Mom. I have a meeting with people who actually believe in my future." I hung up and turned off my phone, leaning back in the plush office chair. Through the window, I could see the Hollywood sign in the distance, a symbol of dreams coming true for those brave enough to chase them and strong enough to leave behind what wasn't serving them. 6 months later, I was living in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan Beach, just a block from the ocean. My marketing position had turned into a rapid promotion track, and I was already being considered for senior roles that typically took years to achieve. My boss had become a mentor, genuinely invested in my success in a way my parents had never been in anything I did. My TikTok platform had grown to over 800,000 followers, and I was using it to help other people navigate difficult family relationships and build healthy boundaries. I was getting speaking opportunities at universities across the country, talking to students about self-worth, family dynamics, and the importance of choosing your own path even when it means disappointing people who were supposed to support you. The book deal had materialized into a bestseller about family favoritism and recovery from emotional abuse. I was getting letters from readers around the world, thanking me for putting words to experiences they had never been able to articulate. Mental health professionals were using my book in their practice, and several universities had added it to their psychology reading lists. But perhaps most importantly, I was genuinely happy. I woke up each morning excited about my work, surrounded by people who valued my contributions and celebrated my successes. I had built a chosen family of friends, mentors, and colleagues who saw me as worthy of love and respect just as I was. Jake reached out occasionally, usually to update me on the continuing fallout from our parents' public humiliation. Their social standing in the community had never recovered. My dad's business had suffered as clients associated him with the viral story of emotional abuse. My mom had developed anxiety and depression, struggling with the reality that her carefully constructed image of the perfect family had been exposed as a lie. Their marriage was struggling under the weight of public scrutiny and the loss of their golden child narrative. Without Jake's achievements to brag about, his football career had stalled due to the negative publicity. They were forced to confront the emptiness of their relationship and the damage they had done to their family. Jake himself was in therapy, trying to understand his role in the family dynamic and work through his guilt about benefiting from favoritism for so many years. He had reached out several times to apologize, and while I appreciated his growth, I made it clear that his enlightenment didn't obligate me to rebuild a relationship that had been fundamentally damaged. "I understand why you can't forgive us," he had said in his last message. "I'm just sorry it took losing you for me to understand how wrong we all were." I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but I also felt no responsibility to fix what they had broken. Some bridges, once burned completely, are meant to stay that way. Some relationships are so damaged that the healthiest choice is to walk away and never look back. One evening, as I was sitting on my balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a young woman named Ashley, maybe 19 or 20, who had seen my TikTok videos and read my book. "Hi, Madison," the message read. "I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story and for writing your book. I'm a sophomore in college, and my parents have always favored my older sister the same way yours favored Jake. Watching your videos and reading about your experience gave me the courage to have an honest conversation with them about how their favoritism affects me. It didn't go great. They got defensive and accused me of being jealous. But at least now I know where I stand. I'm working on building my own support system like you did, and I'm saving up money to pay for my own therapy. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to choose your own family, and that I don't have to accept poor treatment just because it comes from people who share my DNA." I smiled as I typed back. "You're stronger than you know, Ashley. The family you choose for yourself will be the one that truly matters. Trust me on this. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You deserve to be loved and celebrated for exactly who you are." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of gold and pink, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that night at the restaurant. That graduation dinner that was supposed to be the worst night of my life had actually been the beginning of my real life, the moment I finally stopped accepting crumbs and started demanding the full meal. My parents had taught me an important lesson, just not the one they intended. They taught me that love isn't automatic just because you share blood. They taught me that respect has to be earned through actions, not demanded because of biology. They taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who consistently diminish your light to make someone else shine brighter. Most importantly, they taught me what real family looks like by showing me what it definitely doesn't look like. Real family celebrates your victories instead of minimizing them. Real family invests in your dreams instead of dismissing them. Real family makes you feel seen and valued, not like you're competing for basic love and attention. I raised my wine glass to the sunset, to the family I had chosen, to the life I had built with my own hands and my own strength. "Thank you," I whispered to the ocean breeze, "for teaching me what I'm actually worth." Behind me, my phone buzzed with notifications. Friends making dinner plans, colleagues sharing exciting project updates, followers thanking me for inspiring them to set their own boundaries and choose themselves. This was what family sounded like. Support, celebration, genuine love freely given. My story doesn't end with reconciliation or forgiveness, because not every story should. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to protect your peace from people who have consistently proven they don't deserve access to it. Sometimes choosing yourself over blood relation is the most courageous and necessary choice you can make. And to everyone out there who feels invisible in their own family, who feels like they're constantly competing for love that should be freely given, who wonders if they're asking for too much when all they want is basic respect and recognition, you're not alone. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to be loved for exactly who you are, not for who someone else wants you to be, or how you compare to their favorite child. Real family doesn't require you to shrink yourself so others can shine. Real family lifts you up and celebrates your light. Real family invests in your success and takes pride in your achievements. And if the people who share your DNA can't do that, then it's time to find the people who can and will. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you've ever felt humiliated by your own family, diminished by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, made to feel like you're not enough just as you are, tell me where you're watching from. Because in this journey of finding our real families and building lives that honor our worth, none of us should have to walk alone. That graduation dinner chaos was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop begging for love from people who were incapable of giving it fairly, and start building a life surrounded by people who saw my worth from day one. Sometimes the family you're born into teaches you exactly what kind of family you want to create for yourself, and sometimes that's the greatest gift they can give you, even if they never meant to give it at all. The last time I heard from my parents was on my 25th birthday. They sent a card, the first birthday acknowledgement I had received from them in years, with a generic message about hoping I was well, and that maybe we could talk someday. I looked at the card for a long moment, feeling nothing but a distant sort of sadness for what might have been if they had chosen to love me the way they loved Jake. But I didn't respond. Some chapters, once closed, should stay that way. I had spent too many years of my life hoping for their approval to waste any more time on people who had proven themselves incapable of seeing my value. Instead, I celebrated with the family I had chosen. Friends who had stood by me through everything. Mentors who believed in my potential. Colleagues who celebrated my successes as genuinely as if they were their own. That night, as I blew out the candles on the cake my chosen family had surprised me with, I made a wish. Not for reconciliation with my parents, not for Jake to somehow undo years of complicity, not for the past to be different. I wished for continued strength to choose myself, to build a life that honored my worth, and to help other people find the courage to do the same. And as I looked around the table at faces full of genuine love and pride, I knew that wish had already come true. My name is Madison Parker, and this is my story of how a family humiliation became the foundation for the most authentic, successful, and love-filled life I could have ever imagined. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes losing the family you thought you wanted leads you to the family you actually needed all along. And sometimes, standing up for yourself in one moment of courage changes absolutely everything.